So going off of artificial intelligence, I've read a decent amount about Neuralink and Elon Musk, and he's a he's a huge figure in science and pop culture, which is rare. And he talks a lot about blowing up rockets and failing in spectacular fashion. And he's pretty open about the fact that if we weren't blowing up rockets, it would be weird almost, because if you're trying to do something like get to Mars, you should be, screwing shit up in a periodic fashion, or else you're not going to get there. And he actually calls it a rapid, unscheduled disassembly, which I like, because I feel like that's a better way to think of things falling apart, whether it's a rocket or your life. It's not a failure. It's just a rapid, unscheduled disassembly. So for ending aging, I wanted to ask you, what's an example that stands out to you that is a rapid, unscheduled disassembly in your research, in your work, the ending aging version of blowing up rockets, blowing shit up, where you tried something, it didn't work, and you moved past it.
Yeah. Well, of course, aging is really a rather painfully slow, unscheduled disassembly. In fact, it's kind of scheduled. That's kind of the thing that's so scary about it, is that you pretty much know what kind of chronological age you're going to start suffering aging at. So, first of all, I want to say I'm a huge fan of Elon Musk. I think, he thinks like me. He's absolutely, the kind of person who understands that you've got to really aim high in order to make progress. But not really is the answer to your question. Essentially, I can answer this in two ways. First of all, at the level of the overall sense plan, really one of the best pieces of news that has increasingly emerged over these years is the lack of news. In other words, the fact that we have not discovered any new category of aging, any new type of damage that needs a new approach to fixing it. We have not even discovered reasons why the approaches to damage repair for the existing 7 categories are in some way not going to work after all, and that we need a new plan for some particular type of damage. None of that has happened, which is fantastic. It means that the whole paradigm is very much standing the test of time, which of course is increasingly strong circumstantial evidence that it's going to carry on standing the test of time. Mm-hmm. So that's a great thing. In terms of actual failures, well, of course, science is like that. Every time you do an experiment, it's because you don't know what's going to happen. And when things get to the clinic, then the experiments start to get very expensive. You actually have to have a lot of money to run a clinical trial, and most clinical trials fail. So yes, that is beginning to happen. So last year, for example, there were a couple of really rather high-profile examples of this in the aging field. A company named Restore Bio ran a phase 3 clinical trial for basically a calorie restriction mimetic that did not reach its clinical endpoint. And the company collapsed. They were already a public company. They lost literally, I think it was 85% of their share price. And they ended up having to essentially do some kind of reverse merger and essentially give up completely on aging. It was, a big disaster. But this is what you expect at this kind of stage. Investors are not stupid. They understand that sometimes you have to just roll with the punches. And so there was the other example last year that went a very different way. That was Unity Biotechnology, which is the leading company in the C-analytics space. They ran a clinical trial. This was a phase 2 clinical trial. So it wasn't as expensive, but still pretty expensive. Yeah. And it didn't reach its clinical endpoint. And they lost 75% of their share price as well. But they recovered. They've got other trials going on. I mean, their share price is now most of the way back to where it was before that announcement. And that's without any new good news being announced. The other trials that they have going on are still ongoing. The diversity of the field in the private sector is now so great that not just in terms of people and companies, but also just the types of technology that have the potential to be very profitable indeed. That investors, yes, they have to diversify. They have to take a lot of shots on goal in order to hedge their bets, but they're doing that. So,
Yeah.
I would say the examples of bad news are exactly as Elon says, what you expect, and if they're not happening, then you're not trying hard enough. So they are happening, and that's good.
Yeah. Yeah. That's interesting. I wanted to in the last 10 minutes or so, I wanted to make sure I picked your brain on a little bit of the philosophy behind ending aging, about human behavior for the future, because that is a thought that repeatedly popped into my head when I was reading your book and watching interviews. And when we have healthy people that are from different eras of thinking, like maybe a guy from the 1950s, or maybe someone even as far back as that was alive during slavery, is now a biologically 40, 50-year-old man or woman that's working at a coffee shop in Brooklyn. In order for that to happen without everyone killing each other, there will need to be some sort of forgiveness and understanding at a deeper level of how humans are indoctrinated from younger ages and make decisions based on where they grew up, when they grew up. So, yeah, I'm not sure what the right question is in that regard, but have you given thought to what it will mean for how humans are behaving when you have people of different eras and different belief systems growing up side by side, not just from different areas of the world, but from different time periods?
Well, actually, in the last part of your question, you kind of anticipated the first part of my answer, because what I think is that actually there's a strong parallel between the clash of cultures from different parts of the world and the clash of cultures from different eras. As we've seen the world become more globalized, with more interaction between different ethnicities, different cultures, different races, we have, of course, seen unrest. We've seen conflicts arising from that. But society has figured out how to manage, diminish, dampen down those things, and to get more than the sum of the parts rather than less out of these interfaces, these interactions.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's going to be the same. I think what we have right now with the clash of the generation gap, if you like, is largely driven by the fact that different generations, groups of different ages, have different abilities and different views of their futures. People. Jeanne Calment, the world record holder for lifespan, was asked one day when she was like 113. She was asked, "How do you see your future?" And Jeanne Calment said, "Short." Right. If that's no longer true, if people's future is not defined by their past because they don't have aging anymore, then it seems to me that will offer a great opportunity for people of widely divergent chronological ages to interface better. If you can keep up with your granddaughter on the dance floor, you might actually listen to their music a bit. Things like that.